Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this evening and taking your time to speak with us. My name is Jay. I am chairing today's webinar. I'm from London Communications Agency and we are supporting Firethorn on their project to develop a new business and employment campus at the former Honey Monster factory site in Southall. So what will you be expecting from us today and how will it work? So we'll be taking you through the scheme and obviously introducing the team right in front of you. You can see our illustrious panel here. We'll be able to answer any questions you have. We'll do a short presentation for the first, it'll probably roughly take about 20-30 minutes just taking you through the proposals. And then for the rest of the webinar, we'll be fielding questions from yourselves. So please do use the chat function, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen, and you can share questions with us and we can go through them near the end. Just a bit of housekeeping for you. This meeting will be recorded and we'll be posting this meeting also on our website. So do check that out afterwards as well. And as I mentioned before, submit those questions at the bottom of the chat box. But first, I'll hand over to Rob at Firethorn to just take you through the vision.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. Just to sort of kick off, I think just wanted to sort of set the sort of scene really about what we see this site as, and I know many people on the call will be familiar with the sort of previous permission that was granted for the site for the residential scheme. Our vision is very different from that, and looking at the demand in the area, both from tenants and people that want to create businesses in the area in Southall, but also the demographic of Southall and what we can deliver in terms of employment for the borough and how that works. So we very much believe in the vision for the site and the demand for these units, both from tenants and both from local people and the surrounding area and what that can mean to the community. And what we're trying to create really is an ecosystem, really, a site that supports both small businesses, large businesses, big uses from film studios down to maker space for small startup businesses and local people. The site that we're putting forward for planning is a flexible scheme. Essentially, we don't have tenants that are lined up to take these units yet, but what we've designed and what we're proposing for planning is a flexible site that can accommodate a range of different uses, so we can attract the best tenants into these units and create the best spaces for local businesses and local people to work in. I think the site it represents a great unique opportunity for us in terms of what a development of this nature can be. We've obviously got the canal that runs to the south of the site, which provides us a great opportunity to deliver some sort of community assets in terms of a link from east to west, delivering with some local partnerships that we're looking to create in terms of gym facilities, a cycle hub, high quality landscaping to really try and bring to life the site and give it back to nature a little bit and create some sort of valuable green space. So hopefully that sort of sets the sort of scene for what we're going to discuss now going forward with the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Rob. And if I could just leave it to the team to introduce yourselves, maybe starting with Andrew.
Hi everybody, my name's Andrew Sissons. I run A&D London. We've been providing placemaking, commercial advice and also social impact advice on this project.
Well, Ben, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Costello. I work for UMC Architects. We are the master plan architects delivering the scheme here in Southall.
And Sonny?
Good evening. My name is Sonny Desai, Director at TP9 Planning Consultants, and we're advising on planning matters.
And last but not least, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Kirby. I'm from Velocity Transport Planning. We're considering the access arrangements, consideration of public transport links through the scheme, also looking at how pedestrians and cyclists can connect to the site, and of course looking at the operational activity of the scheme on the site as to how heavy goods vehicles and other operational vehicles move through the scheme.
Brilliant, thanks guys, and let's get cracking. So who are Firethorn? Let's hand back to Rob.
So essentially, Farthorn, we've sort of made our name on creating employment spaces across the UK. We've got a number of sites now where we're creating employment space, be that B2, B8, which is industrial and logistics uses. Obviously, with that, we've worked with a number of different tenants, and I think we've sort of, our USP has really been to create really quality spaces, which aren't just buildings, but they create spaces for tenants to come into. And one of the things we found in the market is that these jobs that these types of units create are good jobs, and tenants and companies need to be providing something more to the people that work for them in these locations. So it's not sort of a bog standard product. We try to provide a quality product that delivers a sense of place and wellness and well-being that can really attract people to want to work in these locations and create a sense of place. Part of doing that, we've sort of led on our sustainability criteria and what we ask for. So we deliver all of our projects as BREEAM Excellent, and all of our projects have been net zero carbon in construction. So we're very cognizant of the need to reduce the carbon we use in our projects, and where we can't reduce that to zero, we look to offset that and work with different partnerships to make sure that's a meaningful offset where it actually has some value. In terms of the sort of social value, on every site that we deliver across the UK, we work with our charity partner, who is Groundworks. We deliver a range of different social projects for every one of our sites across the country, whether that be, and that's ranged from forest schools through to food banks, going into schools and speaking to local children. So we really see the value in creating places, not just buildings. And I think I said it before, I think this site in Southall is a unique opportunity to create something unique and special in the area. Oh, so I've covered this already, but yeah, I'll go through again. So yeah, with our community work that we do with Groundworks, this isn't sort of a secondary thing that we think of and tag it on at the end of the project. This is something that we look to do at this stage of the project and speak to our partners about what is the most meaningful way that we can engage in the community and bring things into the projects. Again, Southall is a good opportunity for us because there is a lot of community engagement in the area, and there's a strong community that has a lot of things going on already. So it's amazing, really, the amount of work going on in there at the moment, and it raises a dilemma about whether we sort of do something new with Groundworks, we try to make a difference, or whether we contribute to the local movements in the area already that are doing such good work. So just to touch on what the scheme actually is, as I think everyone probably knows from the information that's been issued, this is a sort of industrial employment-led scheme. And there may be some sort of misconceptions on what that might mean, but the industrial sector is sort of wide-ranging now and supports a number of varied types of jobs, be that from logistics down through to micro manufacturing and makerspace, and a vast range of jobs, and that has a huge worth to the UK economy. You can see there 232 billion, and it supports 2.8 million jobs nationally. And London still has a huge demand for this space to service everything that goes on in London. I think everyone can appreciate after sort of the lockdowns and everything that happened there that deliveries and getting things to people and supply chains in the UK are very robust, but it does rely on this type of space to make everything work for us.
I'll pick this up. So in terms of the current site, it was formerly the Quaker Oats factory that was built in 1936 and evolved with that use, with that industrial use over time, eventually becoming the Honey Monster factory in the 90s. The factory closed in 2016 and was demolished in 2021. So now we have a vacant site effectively at the moment, cleared and vacant site. There was, as Rob alluded to earlier, there was a mixed use planning permission that was granted several years ago now, 2021. It was heavily residential use, residential-led scheme. It was interesting the fact that it was actually a departure in planning terms from the local plan, because this site, which we'll come on to in a second, is designated as an industrial location, a locally significant industrial site. It's not considered that this scheme is appropriate going forward and isn't being delivered. Next. In terms of opportunities and constraints, I think it's probably worth just reiterating the main planning policy designations for the site. So, as I said, this site and the area directly to the south around Bridge Road is a locally significant industrial location, so protected in planning policy at the London Plan and Ealing Plan for industrial uses such as being proposed. The site has some barriers, I think, in terms of connectivity. I think it doesn't connect well with either Glade Park to the east or towards Southall to the west. There's residential existing development to the southeast, as well as houseboats on an element of the canal there. Industrial floor space to the south, with the Middlesex, well, Margarine Works is what we call it, Middlesex Business Park application directly to the east, which has also received planning permission, and Reserved Matters application was approved by the council last week. There are some protected trees across the border to the north along the railway line. Railway line and Glade Park are sites of nature conservation, so important in that respect. And clearly, it's a vacant site. It's not optimizing its potential. There's a great opportunity here to deliver employment and jobs and spaces for the community as well. And we would, as part of the scheme, and there's the potential for an east-west link, pedestrians and cyclists. There's a potential to future-proof changes or rerouting of the local bus routes. So they would serve from the South Havelock estate, going through the site, through the adjacent site once that's delivered to Southall as well. So we think there's a real connectivity piece here, as well as making more of the canal side environment. It's a fabulous asset, and this development has the potential to really activate and enhance that landscape, and hopefully see more people enjoying it.
So the architecture of the site has been set up into 3 separate areas here, all flowing together into one development. So making use of the canal, we have a hub to bring people together, the coffee kiosk and the area designated as the wheat store. And then to the north west, we have the Maker Quarter, which is slightly larger units, and the innovation zone to the northeast of the existing bridge over the canal. The architecture in terms of its appearance has been designed with the canal in mind and making the most of the nice landscaping environment that people can work in, rather than just a box within a box, quite a negative experience in other areas. In doing that, we've created the large glazed facades, south facing, plenty of sunshine, whilst also providing the logistical requirements to operate these industrial units from day to day, with the service yards to the north or to the non-sensitive receptors of the site. The wheat store to the south is the smaller makers areas to allow smaller businesses to come together, share, bounce ideas off each other's, bounce resources off each other, but then also start in their career. And I'll pass that on to Andrew to develop a little bit more on.
So the wheat store is something that we discovered is really needed within Southall. The local business community is overwhelmingly micro in size. That's 1 to 9 people, and there's lots of those small businesses started every year. But what we found when looking at literally every commercial building within the Southall area, there isn't enough of this small space designed specifically for those types of business, with shared facilities such as shared bathrooms, showers for people traveling in by bike, meeting rooms, breakout areas and stuff like that. So it's really important to be able to provide some workspace that really supports the local community and is accessible and is affordable for people who've got either a small business or just starting a business at this point in time. So there'd be small units ranging from anywhere between 20 square meters and 100 square meters. We're providing just under 30,000 square foot of space that will be divided up into these small units over a multi-level building. So it will be ground plus 3 floors as well of really appropriate, really well-designed space for that community. Hopefully, the plan is that businesses will eventually move on into bigger units as they start to grow. But this slide tells you about the jobs that will be created across the site, and trying to create a environment that creates really good jobs. We don't just want to create just entry-level jobs. We want to be able to create a range of different jobs in different sectors. So there'll be a lot of office jobs, there'll be a lot of making and creating jobs, there'll be manufacturing, engineering, distribution, all of those types of employment roles as well. And what we'll be doing is trying to create the right environment to be able to help local people access those jobs. So we have a whole employment strategy where we're working with the council, we'll be working with local colleges and employment brokerages to make sure that we get as many of those jobs into the local economy as possible. And this just shows you the various different phases of space and how it will be distributed across the site. In terms of tenants, this gives you a breakdown of what we're looking to create. We don't just want to create an industrial estate, we want to create a campus environment and a real mix of businesses. And businesses these days really want to be in those environments where they're not just next to the same type of company, but lots of different businesses where they can benefit and network and create opportunities and form new ideas and stuff like that. So a whole range of different businesses, ranging from anything from film and TV and recording studios to manufacturing, advanced engineering, e-commerce, logistics and distribution in the bigger units, and those small maker creative spaces as well. This just gives you an indication of what we think the scheme will bring to the local economy. Our team have worked out the economics of the scheme and how much it's going to put into the local economy in terms of, real social value and actual gross value add, which is, real economic input into creating a much more thriving and sustainable economy in Southall. So that top total is the GVA from the whole scheme. What it will do will provide a large increase in Ealing's current industrial land, what each job will create, how much affordable workspace, the level of social value that we're creating. So that's really important in terms of the employment opportunities, the mentoring, the apprenticeships, the school visits, the campaigns and awareness events that we run with the local business community, having business associations and stuff like that. So it will generate a significant amount of social value on an annual basis. And then finally, that's the boost in terms of the council tax that the scheme will generate. So the innovation zone is going to be the larger units that you saw on your right hand side. And so we think that could be anything from urban farms and film studios to large breweries and large distribution centres. So there's real innovation in the industrial sector at the moment, and we do a lot of leasing and we work with a lot of businesses looking for this type of space. So we've been able to make some really good kind of assessments of what we think will turn up in the future, and these are the type of businesses that are looking for space in those larger units. The Maker Quarter we think that will be slightly smaller units. So they could be anywhere from between 9, 10, 15,000 up to 35,000 square foot or so. And that would be a mix of people who are making things, manufacturing on site. That could be food production, it could be furniture design, it could be things like advanced robotics, which we're increasingly seeing in the new green industries that are very much coming into industrial areas across the country at the moment, as well as providing this really important affordable workspace for people looking to get into business and open an operation like this. Wheat store, and this is like to give you a kind of glimpse of what that could well look like. Really important in terms of providing a point of difference to those larger units that we've just described. Really focused on small businesses. The ground floor could be a mix of maker and people selling stuff from there. So we, for example, on other schemes we're working on, there are small jewellery makers who also want to be able to sell. As we're working with a candle maker at the moment, they want to be able to produce on site and to be able to sell. So they very much want a space where they can interact with passers-by and have a really positive environment to be able to make and sell. And so creating a sense of place at this point on the site is really important, and we think that will be managed by an operator on a day-to-day basis who will look after the tenants and run the building. But this is typical across lots of locations in London where we're starting to build these types of business centre that really works for small businesses. In terms of the community offer, the client has asked us to think really big about this and to create a really important location alongside the canal. And you can see here our in-house artist Olga has just started to really kind of dream big about what we could do down there. The canal is a great resource. It can plug into the wider community. It can be a nice place for people to visit nature. We're planning on a really interesting little coffee kiosk that be architecturally designed and of a very high standard. We're looking at public art down here as well and trying to create, a real nature trail, but in an urban environment. As I think in some of the consultation events we've done recently, people have said that it's a very urban environment. There's a lot of new residential, trying to create some interesting green space that has a real impact for the community and making it a really great place for local residents as well as businesses. You can't produce business space these days without really considering the health and well-being of workers, and that extends far beyond the bricks and mortar of their building. It's the surrounding area as well, making sure the landscaping, the greenery, the nature, it has a really positive impact for workers. And so you can imagine bringing together all of that public art, things like outdoor gyms, which will be free for people to use, and coffee kiosks and food trucks will create a nice environment for people to visit. This isn't my speciality, so I'll shut up now and pass on to someone else.
So I think I should take this one, really, seeing as it's our sort of ambitions that dictate this to the team, and we sort of say what we expect from our developments, and this one will be no different. So we'll be targeting BREEAM Excellent, which surpasses the sort of industry standard. As I mentioned earlier, all of our schemes that we've taken through planning have achieved BREEAM Excellent. It's also low embodied carbon materials and energy efficient buildings. So obviously we'll be working within the GLA framework in terms of an energy statements and making sure that the buildings are as sustainable and energy efficient as possible. That will also feed in to what we look to do with our strategy for PV panels on the roofs. So we would ideally, as part of the GLA, like to offset no power for the operation of the building, so that all of the power for the operations of the building as a standard we offset through PV on the project, with rainwater harvesting as well. We've obviously got very large roofs on these units, so we look to reuse some of that water back into the buildings to make it as sustainable as possible. I think what isn't mentioned on here is the net zero carbon within construction. So we will look to reduce and mitigate the sort of use of carbon as we build the site. So at the point where we hand over these buildings to tenants, there will be zero carbon in the buildings. And then it will be sort of down to a certain extent, but encouraged through green leases with the tenants coming in to operate these buildings as fully zero carbon. So they have a neutral impact on the environment completely. So this is, so Andrew, do you want to cover these? These are your.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've tried to do is to really invest in nature along the canal area. So there are reed beds, there'll be beehives, there'll be bat boxes, there'll be swift towers, there'll be bird hides that people will be able to use. It's really trying to create a natural environment along that canal front that will create a place where people really want to visit.
Just to add to that, I suppose from a planning perspective, there's two metrics that are required for applications such as this. One is to achieve an urban greening factor score of 0.3, obviously slightly technical terminology, but basically to enhance the greening of the site and a biodiversity net gain of over 10%. And so we're working to exceed those targets.
I'll pick this up, Jay, as it's to do with transport. This plan shows the connectivity of the scheme to the local area. Obviously, we've got the benefit of being quite close to the Southall station and the new Elizabeth line that recently opened. There is an opportunity to get a more direct link to that station once the adjacent scheme, the Margarine Works, the Middlesex Business Park, is up and running. And as Sunny mentioned earlier, I think it was Sunny, they recently had their first phase of detailed permission granted just last week. So that's all coming along. We will tie into that. And what's interesting, if Jay, I don't know if you can present where, or at least I direct where the bus link might be, which is also going to follow through the Margarine Works, through our site. It's referenced there as being the E5 diversion, which will then run to the south down to the Havelock Estate scheme. That's going to introduce potentially as many as up to 10 buses an hour in both directions. So really bringing the opportunity for public transport links to the scheme. The links across the site, pedestrian and cycle links, not just from the station, also offer opportunities to connect with the Glade Lane Canalside Park, the country park. Again, offering an opportunity to cross the site where there isn't any at present. In fact, Glade Lane is segregated from the station at present. You've got to come through the south. Other opportunities, there's probably a better plan to talk about the vehicular access points, but this shows the connectivity for those sustainable links. It's a little bit about the traffic and how we consider the differences in the schemes. Obviously, an industrial scheme is going to generate heavy goods vehicles and light goods vehicles that are associated with the operational activity. That's necessary for an industrial scheme of this scale. What we've done is we've looked at, firstly, how many trips were generated by the permitted development. And you can see from that top point there was about 795 two-way vehicle movements identified in a day, all of which would use the Bridge Road link. The Honey Monster scheme, which of course was the permitted development previous to what's just achieved planning permission, that actually generated just over 1,300 two-way vehicle movements in a day. We've identified approximately 685. So that's about half what the former Honey Monster factory generated, and it's less than the consented scheme. There's very few car parking spaces provided on this industrial site. That's to meet the London Plan parking requirements. So there's actually only going to be about 60 car parking spaces, which means we wouldn't be expecting to have large numbers of cars associated with the site. It does, of course, lead us on to the next point, which is we need alternatives for staff to use. So we're going to be providing cycle parking, again, in line with the London Plan requirements, which obviously quite high. There's also a need to ensure that we provide at least 5% of those cycle parking spaces for larger cycles. Those are cargo bikes, not just for people using the site to commute to, but also for the actual operational activity. It's a big thing to allow for those smaller businesses to use cargo bikes for cycling. There'll also be around about 20% of the provision provided as Sheffield stands, which are effectively just cycle stands that'll be in the public realm, available for visitors to the site as well as staff. There's a need for us to meet the London Plan requirements for electric vehicle charging, which is to provide 20% of all car parking spaces with a passive provision, or at least have those parking spaces provided from the start. So about 12 electric vehicle charging points, but also then to allow for all of the remaining spaces to become electric vehicle charging capable once the scheme has developed. So all of that will be factored in. We've identified that there's a decrease in heavy goods vehicle activity compared to the former Honey Monster site. Of course, all of those traffic, the Honey Monster traffic would have been on the local network. I appreciate it's not there now. The site is vacant. The improvements to Bridge Road, this is the key issue, and I'm sure as many of you might be attending this event, you know the area, you know the constraints along Bridge Road. There are existing businesses that are operating along Bridge Road. It is congested at present, but our starting point for considering how we would access the site along Bridge Road was to visit, or at least revisit, what was considered as part of the permitted development, which was a primarily residential scheme, so it had lots more cars than we're proposing, but it still had heavy goods vehicles. There was still a need for the employment option or opportunity on that permitted development to gain access to the site. And an improvement scheme was agreed with London Borough of Ealing, which looked to reduce the opportunity for congestion along Bridge Road. So we're looking to not only I suppose honor the improvement scheme, but we're looking to make improvements that would help with the managing of the activity along Bridge Road. There's also, I suppose, the introduction of a new pedestrian and cycle link along the southern part of Bridge Road.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. That's really, really great. Just in terms of consultation as well, you are at one of our consultation events, so thanks for joining us today. We also had an event on Saturday and we have one tomorrow as well, so please do come down if you'd like to, and if you had the time. We're around at the Dominion and Library Centre from 3:30 to 7 o'clock tomorrow as well, and there'll be plenty more opportunities for you to provide your feedback over the coming weeks as well. Just to give you sort of a really brief synopsis of what we've been doing, I'm sure you probably heard about our consultation events via our flyers, which we issued to thousands of residents around the site, including the Havelock estate as well. Advertising in the local press, including online adverts in My London, social media adverts, which if you are on Facebook and you're around the area, just go on it and you'll probably see a few of our adverts as well pop up on your screen. And we do have a dedicated website as well, so do check that out. It has all of our boards that will be showing at the events, but also really importantly a survey. As Andrew said, this is really not only just a business and employment campus, but this is something for the community too, and we really want to get your feedback, particularly on those bits around the art trails and nature trails, all those kind of things that we'd want the community to get involved in, develop and shape going forward. And we're holding lots and lots of meetings as well. If you'd like to speak with us as well, do let us know, get in contact, and there's some contact details at the end of this presentation. And it's right here. So talk to us here. You can talk to us, you can drop us an email, you can go on our website, as I mentioned, give us a call, and you can scan that as well if you're quick enough as well to get on that website. And just going through really briefly the timeline, obviously we are at a really early stage. We have not submitted a planning application. We're hoping to submit in the coming months ahead. And obviously we will give you forewarning of that as well beforehand. And then we're hoping that the application will be considered by Ealing's Planning Committee sometime in the summer. And if we do get the go ahead, and then it is quite, and Rob will attest to this as well, quite a quick turnaround in terms of construction. We're talking about, I think, Rob, between 9 to 12 months potentially. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make actually, because yeah, if all things go well, we'd be looking to get on site in the winter of this year, early next year, and yeah, 9 to 12 months of construction, and the site would be up and running and ready for tenants to move in. So this isn't a sort of long-term, medium-term site. This can be sort of delivered quickly in the next couple of years, with all things going well.
Brilliant. And I'll hand back to you, Rob, just to give a closing statement on the proposals.
Well, hopefully that sort of answered some of your questions through that presentation, but essentially this scheme sort of fundamentally comes down for Firethorn and for Kane International and for the council and for, I think, for all stakeholders in the site, is about creating jobs. And I think the biggest part of creating jobs on this site is that these are local jobs that are appropriate to go to local people and provide employment for local people in the Southall area. And that's why there's a big push on ensuring that the public transport is correct to the site, that there's suitable foot and pedestrian access for people to get to this site from the local areas, because that's where we want the workforce to be coming from, in the local area. And yeah, just to touch on some of these other points on here, so it's flexible workspaces, and I think we sort of touched on some of the potential uses through the presentation. It's sort of worth pointing out again that we are building this without any tenants in place. So we're building this speculatively. So we're building it to be as flexible as possible to suit as many of those different uses as possible, to ensure we can attract the best employers and attract the best businesses to the areas and attract the local businesses and the SMEs and startups into our site, because we think it can be really valuable to the community. So yeah, touching as well, range of industries. It's not just sort of the traditional sort of logistics, just a big shed full of racking with a couple of people working there. This is a real diverse site and designed to be flexible to allow a number of different uses. And that all just sort of links through to the sort of what I consider personally to be the sort of best piece of the site, which is the canal, and what that brings to the site and what we can do with that. And like Jay said, we are looking for people to get involved and to give suggestions and to be involved with the next step of the project, in terms of having ideas about what you'd like that to be, what you'd like to see, how you think that would work, what you think wouldn't work, and sort of help us in this next process to get this right for the local people. And obviously everyone on this call, I imagine, is local to the area and will have their own views on what they think would work, and we want to hear what your thoughts are.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. And I hope that has given you lots and lots of information to digest. I'm just going to stop sharing really quickly, and then we can go through some of the questions as well. We have one from anonymous attendee. There's a question on what is the CCTV strategy? The Bridge Road area has many problems. In the past, CCTVs included, but it's not effective or monitored and not managed properly. To generally determine crime, this is a key issue. So I think that's probably sort of a wider question around security and safety around the Bridge Road area. I'm not 100% sure who would want to take this. Maybe I'll have a crack.
I'll have the first crack, shall I? So I think it is a key issue, and in this phase of the project, this is where we are starting to speak to the police in terms of assessing the site, looking at the site design and giving us suggestions on how we can make that safer. And that's not just CCTV, that's physical measures as well. It's where does a fence need to be, how high does that fence need to be, and all these details. In terms of CCTV generally, the site as proposed at the moment will be managed by us, by Firethorn, as the project becomes populated by tenants and all different people coming into the site. It will be managed by us, and there will be a service charge that the tenants will contribute to, and that will pay for all of these things like CCTV around the site and ensuring that there is security in place and security guards in the evening and things of that nature to make sure that it's a safe place. But one of the key points, I think, and it's been raised during the consultations we've had, is ensuring that if that canal route is going to be a public route, that it's well lit and it's safe, and it provides for local people what it needs to provide, which is a safe, where you feel safe when you're walking along there, not just because there's CCTV, but because the lighting's adequate and it does what it says on the tin in terms of delivering a safe route for people to get through and enjoy a bit of the countryside whilst you're doing that.
Bro, thanks, Rob. I hope that's answered the question. Does anyone else have any additional things that they might want to say? Or otherwise we can move on. Or Ben?
Yes, just to give you a bit more comfort in what's happening in the coming couple of days. I actually have a meeting, first of a couple, I assume, with the Met Police to discuss the site, as Rob's alluded to, and that is not just a tick box exercise for the planning consultation. It's also a BREEAM target credit that we're targeting. So we will have to demonstrate how we've taken their comments on board and implemented it into the scheme, not just at planning, but actually at the end of the project, turn around and say, look, here's the proof we've done it. Otherwise we won't get the credit.
Brill, thanks, Ben. I know we've got quite a short number of attendees as well, so I think we could just allow just to have a little bit of more of an informal chat with a few of you guys. So I don't know if you guys had any questions at all. Please let us know. Maybe I can start off with Raj Singh. I'll click on this button to allow you to talk, so feel free. You got the ability to. Any questions, Raj?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, no questions. Just a silent listener.
No problem at all.
Okay.
You're putting everyone on the spot, Jay.
Stop
Yeah, no, I just wanted to tune in, listen in, see what the project was about. So yeah, no, just intrigued. That's all.
No problem at all. Well, do type in any questions you have or any comments at all. We'd be happy to answer.
Sure.
No problem. Does Councillor Martin or Jag Sangera have any questions? Do you guys have any questions at all? Maybe I'll start with Councillor Martin, just in case you'd like to answer something. The floor is yours, Councillor Martin.
Good evening.
Hi.
Honestly, yeah, I've got loads of questions, and we could probably take up the rest of the evening with it, to be quite honest. Look, got huge reservations about the access in and out. Appreciate what you've been saying. Taking away parking spaces for the other businesses is probably not the way forward. Bridge Road is a very poor accessible sort of road when you get to the bottom of where your site is, and having spent the last probably the last 2-3 weeks up and down there on various different days and times, it is a huge issue that I think we need to have further discussions on, definitely. Intrigued about the local jobs for the local people. How do you think you're going to be able to insist on that? I think that's something. I mean, look, I want to bring jobs to Southall. I think we all do. Little bit concerned about obviously making sure that they're well paid and proper living wage jobs. That's another big thing. I'm also a little concerned over the parking issues. There will be a hotel that is going to be built along that stretch, with the best part of, I believe, 180 rooms, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah, I think you're
So
right.
I think we've got issues with that. look, we know something has to happen with that site. We certainly would like to see something positive. I think what you've put forward is lovely. It does look lovely, but I would like to look at it. Will it work? Is it going to work?
Yeah.
How do we make it work? Your transport in and out is also an interesting one. It's all well and good running buses round the Havelock and back out into the Uxbridge Road potentially. There's no transport connection that will bring you to the rest of the ward, the Norwood Green ward. It certainly doesn't bring it. Trying to get my compass out actually to work out which way I need it to work. But extending the E5, I'm sorry, is not going to work. We need to look at certainly a better transport, certainly from a bus point of view. We have lots of connections just outside the ward with other train stations, which I think we could link to quite easily. I've already been pushing for the E5 bus extension, which doesn't seem to be going any further at the moment. But that is something I think, again, we can have further conversations on. The Elizabeth line is just one line of communication to, or sorry, transport to get into the development. We need to have more. Extending the E5 is just not ideal, is what I'd probably say on that. I love the name of the buildings, by the way. I thought that's a real plus point. And I think if we can have some further discussions and I suppose look at it a little bit more, I suppose, constructively, I'm sure we can sort of make this work. It's just, I have to say, Bridge Road is a huge concern. Well done on the CCTV question. We do have issues along there. If you are having conversations with the police, I do sit on a number of police panels as well. Would like, if possible, to be somewhere involved with that, because the actual Metropolitan Police do have a team, not just a local team, but actually a building team who help and design these type of buildings. So I do think that would be a very, very good starting point to make sure that we do get, I suppose at the end of the day, get it right. And that's what we're here to do. I think there are some concerns, and I think certainly the conversations can continue, and maybe we'll set a meeting up with me and my fellow councillors to move this forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, Councillor Martin. Let's do that. Let's take that offline as well. Maybe we can use this as an opportunity to address some of those concerns that you have as well. I've noted a few down as well. So why don't we tackle? Why don't we tackle the transport ones first of all? And I know, Mark, you could probably chip in quite well here as well. So just to recite what you said, Councillor Martin. Obviously, you have a few concerns around the access, particularly on obviously Bridge Road. You're slightly concerned about some of the parking issues potentially with a number of new developments around the area, particularly the hotel. And also, is the E3 enough? Is extending that enough to help alleviate some of that pressure too? So maybe should we start off with the access to Bridge Road first, and maybe we can go on to some of the other ones. So Mark, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Your concerns over Bridge Road are well founded. I have been to the site a number of times, and on the occasions that I've been to the site, it's been really quite challenging to get to the site through Bridge Road. I actually parked away from the site when I visited the site because the traffic was just a little bit too congested. But as I say, we did look, and I mentioned it when I was just discussing the access issues. We looked at what the solution, if you like, that was presented and agreed with Ealing was as part of the permitted development. I would just add that the permitted development had an alternative means of access to the site. It had a link onto Glade Lane over on the eastern side of the site. But that was for cars, and of course, a residential-led scheme, nearly 2,000 residential units on the permitted development, and about 300-ish car parking spaces for the residential element. So a substantially higher number of cars would have been associated with the site. And of course, those cars would have been afforded the opportunity to use that alternative route via, well, down Glade Lane and along Hadlock Road to the south of the scheme. That's not something that's going to be acceptable for a scheme of this nature. We couldn't have operational vehicles using Glade Lane coming in from the side and trying to avoid Bridge Road. It's not appropriate to have those larger vehicles passing through residential areas. We recognize that. And a lot of our discussions that have been with the officers, the highway officers at Ealing, have been to not only recognize that it's a challenge to access the site along Bridge Road, but to just dig down a little bit more into what that improvement scheme is along Bridge Road. And to be honest, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, Councillor Martin, from having visited the site, as you say, recently, it's about enforcement. It's about ensuring that people behave. There are traffic regulation orders, there are waiting and loading restrictions, and yes, the proposal does propose to reduce the amount of, it's actually a control parking zone. It's pay and display parking along the northern side of the cemetery along Bridge Road. But in order to deliver an opportunity to get a clearer means of access along Bridge Road, which is not just dependent on this scheme, although this scheme would certainly benefit from it, but the other operational uses, it is an industrial area, they're all reliant on improving access along Bridge Road. And unfortunately, the onus for that improvement rests with the Highway Authority. They have the legal means of enforcing. There are opportunities, and we are discussing with Ealing how we might be able to support them in that. We've already discussed the potential to introduce some bollards along the new footway, the shared footway cycleway along the southern side of Bridge Road. Those bollards would prevent, effectively, people from parking illegally. I saw it when I was there, when I visited the site. People just bump up onto the curb, not just in terms of parking, but for servicing as well. There isn't anybody adhering to the legal requirements, the traffic regulation orders that are imposed along Bridge Road, and we're looking to enhance those, if you like, or the strategy is to do it. But the onus rests with Ealing to enforce. And whilst we can support them and provide physical measures to help make that an easier process, as I say, it rests with the local highway authority to implement the enforcement actions that they have at their disposal. I'm not sure that there's much else we can do. We have discussed the potential to access the site through the Margarine Works, the scheme that's adjacent to this to our site to the west. Ealing are not keen on any operational vehicles passing through that scheme, nor for that matter with the developers of that scheme. So we are constrained to only being able to access the site via Bridge Road. The public transport matter, I mean, I wonder, Jay, if I don't just lead on to that, seems that it kind of all relates to the same thing. On the plan that we presented, we did discuss the opportunity to extend the E5 bus route, which is the bus route that currently serves Glade Lane and the Havelock Estate to the south of our scheme. We've met with Transport for London, who are the public transport authority in this area, in all of London. They have a team working on this. It may not be an extension to the E5 bus service. In fact, the previous scheme looked at introducing a different diversion. I think it was the 247 route. But Ealing have informed us that they will take their strategy away to improve. It might be a completely new bus service that is providing a link through this area. I think it's also key to note that as part of the permitted development, and I appreciate it was a residential scheme or predominantly residential scheme, there were far more people associated with the permitted scheme that would not only live there but work there. I mean, thousands more than we would be generating on our site. And in terms of a public transport sort of demand, if you like, from the permitted development, it was much higher. But then they had identified a financial contribution to TfL of £1.5 million. Now, that wasn't ring-fenced for a particular service. It was for TfL to use in order to improve public transport accessibility through the area. We've also done a little bit of research into what the Section 106 contributions were agreed for the adjacent scheme at Margarine Works. That was £1.3 million. And the Havelock Estate to the south, they have £1.4 million. So we're in the order of £4 to £5 million in pure public transport benefits to this area from these three schemes combined. So there is a lot of opportunity, and public transport is going to be a really, really key issue, because that brings me on to parking, your next concern. The London plan is very clear on the level of parking that developments are not just of this scale, residential schemes, as you I'm sure are aware. The big drive now is to have car-free developments where there's no parking provided, with the exception of some disabled parking. This scheme has quite stringent car parking requirements associated with it. Only one space per 600 square meters of floor space is permissible to have a parking associated with it. And that equates to about 60 car parking spaces across the entire site. That's not a lot. There isn't the opportunity for people to park on the surrounding streets. The adjacent scheme at the Margarine Works, they'll have the same level of parking constraints on them. There are opportunities for people to park further away if they're going to drive to the site to work, potentially in the residential areas. But as we've stipulated, and the desire for the scheme is to create local jobs for local people. There should be no reason for people to drive, certainly not people within the immediate area. It may be limited staff or people who are maybe required to come from further afield to meet some of the requirements on this job, but we don't expect there'll be more than 60 spaces required on a daily basis. With the improved public transport, with the connectivity to the local station, which is on the Elizabeth line now, does provide good opportunities for those types of links. The parking needs to be constrained. That's the policy. That's what we're addressing. Of course, it does mean we're providing an increased number of cycle parking spaces. Those cycles parking spaces won't just be for the staff. There'll be visitor spaces. But as I think Andrew made the point, particularly in the wheat store where you've got the shared facilities, there'll be showers, there'll be lockers, there'll be spaces for those cyclists to want to cycle to the site. So it's not just about restricting the amount of parking and pushing people away from the site and parking elsewhere. That's not the intention, and we are meeting the London plan requirements for car parking, and cycle parking for that matter. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more comfort.
I suppose, Mark, thanks very much for that. I suppose we still don't get round the access point, and I suppose it is literally, and as you say, enforcement is one thing. But we've also got to think about the other businesses that are around there, from Charles House and the like, and they have been used to facilities being there. Admittedly, I think enforcement could be better. Let's be fair, and you know, that point is taken. Another option is for people to use Southall Station, and this is something to consider, and I've also spoken to the other developers about this. There is a new bridge that has been put across the railway line. Is this a good opportunity to be talking to, I don't think it is TfL who run GWR or run the Elizabeth line. Oh, well, no, they run the Elizabeth line. But is there an option where we can put in potentially access points from that bridge down onto Southall Station, therefore trying to, I suppose, limit the amount of people walking up Merrick Road and right into South Road to basically go to the main station's entrance? And the reason why I ask that is the pavements are particularly narrow. They, in theory, probably couldn't be widened because it's a single, well, actually it's a double lane on one side, but that's when you get over the bridge. But is this something that what we want to do is encourage people to use public transport? But in order to do that, we need to make it safe and actually give them options. So is that something that you may well look at possibly working with us as a local authority to try and push, and potentially, yes, assist us with it?
100%, Councillor Martin. That's I must be honest. When I visited the site the first time, I visited the site at night just 2 weeks ago, just to get a sense of what it's like in the dark. But when I visited the site in the day, that new footbridge wasn't actually open across to the station yet. So if it is open now, it's very recently opened. But we certainly had expected that any pedestrians from our site that might want to go to the station would certainly be able and afforded the opportunity to use that. So if it doesn't actually connect with the platforms at present, that's certainly something for us to take up. And I think we take it up with TfL. TfL would have pioneered, I think, that scheme.
It's a great idea because it's a simple and great idea. It is, because I was there the weekend, and the bridge literally goes across and comes down next to the platform, but you can't get into the station from it. So it's something simple, like a tap in, tap out machine, and a gate, and then it cuts off probably at least 5 minutes walk around the outside and takes off that bit of the road that, like you say, isn't the greatest pavement to be walking up.
I would just also add, you made a point about South Road and the bridge, which is constrained, and the routes from our scheme and this part of Southall to the station. One of the previous proposals, if you like, was to widen South Bridge, and the previous scheme, the permitted development, had actually identified a £500,000, £500,000 contribution to Ealing for those bridge widening works. Now, those bridge widening works are not going to happen. And I mentioned this to a chap called Chris Cole at London Borough of Ealing to say, well, what are we going to do about it? It's not that we're trying to sort of shirk the responsibility of making that contribution, but if you're not widening the bridge, now he very clearly said to me, Ealing are really striving forward with an active travel measures, which would look to improve the crossing of South Road across the bridge. They're looking to introduce improved cycling facilities, particularly cycling facilities where they'd widen the cycling offer, whether it's cycling lanes on carriageway, but segregated or improved and increased widths of footways. And they'd be seeking that contribution from us to go towards their strategy for providing an improved opportunity for connectivity for cyclists and pedestrians across the wider area. So we will be contributing to that, part of a much bigger strategy than just our site.
Yeah, look, I think, to be fair, and I'm supposed to throw this out there, look, Southall is unique. To re-educate as many people as we can to get out of their cars and onto bikes or another alternative mode of transport is taking longer than anywhere else across the borough because they have become so reliant on cars. However, in saying that, I mean, the great work that Let's Go Southall are doing and other organisations across Southall is brilliant. But we still have to look at this, that it is a car-driven area. So we do need to certainly consider that. I'm a bit worried also just about the sort of HGVs, the sort of dealings I've had with film companies. They don't tend to drive around with small trucks. It's sort of getting HGVs in and out of there and Southall. What route are they going to use? And again, it becomes difficult, and it's just trying to work out a sensible plan that a HGV driver puts in a code and a postcode, and then suddenly finds that he's down 3 different alleyways and no entry. Some of the roads will be impractical for them to get through, and some of them won't. So it's about infrastructure, isn't it, here? And we've got to make sure that we get the infrastructure right so that the whole scheme works and we don't find that it's sort of gridlocking all the time.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And again, we've had discussions with Ealing and TfL for that matter. on a strategy. We're referring to it as an operational management plan. It's a bit like a delivery and servicing plan, as you would see for any scheme of this nature, and it's a requirement to be prepared as part of a planning application to set out the strategy. We've looked at all of the routes, the potential routes. I've used Google Maps just to get an indication of, forget about HGVs, if you put in Google Maps, how you're going to get to the strategic network, the A40 to the north, the A312 over to the west, the A4 to the south. Those are the key strategic routes that heavy goods vehicles will take as they approach the site, and of course, if they leave the site. So we've looked at the key routes that would be taken, and then we've analyzed the amount of traffic using those routes. We've looked at other constraints. There are, particularly to routes to the south, there are some nighttime constraints where heavy goods vehicles are not really, it's not that they're not permitted, but traffic passing through the area, heavy goods vehicles, 18 ton, 16.5 ton vehicles, they're not permitted along some of those routes out of hours unless they've got a permit. So any operational activity associated with the industrial uses on our site would have to apply for those permits, those end users, tenants, and all of that is going to be managed through this operational management plan, which will be reviewed on a regular basis. There might be construction schemes in a certain part of the local area, which means that area has to be avoided. There might be roadworks, there might be I don't know, events that might be happening. I expect periods around Diwali and that sort of thing might actually close up some of the roads. So it gives that opportunity to review how those heavy goods vehicles will access the site all through the year and over different periods, and considering constraints that will come up. So we are looking at that. We are in talks with both Ealing and of course with TfL. It's from their strategic network that will access the site, and we're doing as much as we can to do that.
Okay, I think that's travel. I think that's travel taken care of. Looking at your sort of shop units on the ground level, little concern just because of the change in class with the sort of E-class scenario the government have introduced. Little concern that we don't end up with those units basically becoming, I suppose, food outlets, pizza shops, burger joints, that sort of scenario where we end up with sort of nighttime antisocial behavior, that sort of thing. And just a little concerned how you're going to be able to manage that.
Who would potentially like to take that one?
Well, so in terms of the application, we'll be applying for specific uses. The only retail use, which is a EA use, would be for a kiosk cafe at the head of the canal. All of the other units have different use classes, but predominantly within the B2, which is general industry, B8, logistics and storage, or the EG use classes, which is office, industrial processes, research and development, etc. So they are quite specific use classes, and we would expect the council to, first of all, that to be defined in any decision, and it will certainly be in the application, but also prevent any cross uses within Class E within a safeguarding condition. So the council are well versed and able to control that. Hopefully that gives some comfort.
Yeah, but most local authorities seem to be losing control because central government seems to be dictating too much at the moment. But hey,
yeah, no, you're totally right, councillor, and that's why councils are putting on, in situations where the legislation is that, say, central government relax it, and there isn't specific controls on an individual planning permission. So historic developments, councils have lost office space in particular, as well as changes to the retail. And that's why they're putting Article 4s on, Article 4 directions to try and control that. But as I say, that only relates to development or sites that don't have a restrictive condition on. So for this as a new development, it would certainly have restrictive conditions on. So you wouldn't be able, regardless of what the government did, there'd be a condition that says you cannot move within these use classes or any change to those use classes going forward.
Okay, that's useful to know. Thanks very much. Well, look, I think I've taken up quite a bit of your time, to be honest. I would like further discussions, maybe in a couple of weeks' time. And I think, as been suggested, maybe we do have a site meeting down there, and it'd be nice to actually go on site rather than just be standing outside it, like I tend to do most Sunday mornings while I look at the state of Bridge Road.
We'll try and pick a good weather day as well, because I think it's going to be snowing the next couple of days potentially. But
we're there tomorrow, aren't we? So that'd be nice fun. Site visit, minus temperatures in the rain.
Oh, don't we
That's
love
why my
it?
colleagues
Don't
going
we
to
love
send
it
me
with our
off.
Wellingtons.
Yeah, I don't know what coat to wear. I was like, gonna have to be a ski jacket at this rate.
All right, listen, gentlemen, thank you very much tonight. I haven't got anything more to add, but no, thanks very much. Very informative, and yeah, good presentation. Thank you.
No problem at all. No, thank you for
Thanks very
coming, and
much.
thanks for everyone else for coming as well. And yeah, we'll bring this to a close, but we'll absolutely be in touch as well on providing some further updates. And of course, Carlos and Martin, let's take it offline about sorting out a site tour.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care and have a good evening.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
everyone.